It's all comedy in theory. We can laugh at what we need. It's all comedy in theory. We can laugh at what we want.
Welcome to It's All Comedy in Theory, a historic and hilarious look at who and what makes us laugh. I'm your host, Charlie Spink. In today's episode, we take a look at the beginnings of the comics who committed their art to vinyl. This was an important shift in bringing comedy into American households, especially the type of humor that wasn't necessarily created for all ages. That's right, we're going on the record, talking about the record-making and record-breaking art of making comedy records. Try to say that 5 times fast. Before the capturing of comedy on vinyl, the only way to bring stand-up home involved kidnapping a comedian, building a brick wall in your living room, and enforcing a 2-drink minimum. Hey, water doesn't count. Because recording and playing devices became more common in the late 1800s, the earliest recorded comedians were typically from the vaudeville era. If you've seen any of our previous episodes on vaudeville, you're sure to recognize a few of these names. In the late 1890s, Cal Stewart, of no relation to Jon Stewart of The Daily Show, or Cal University from universities Charlie Spink did not get into. Cal Stewart was a vaudeville comedian and humorist. He recorded monologues and jokes as the rustic Uncle Josh, which included some of the earliest recorded banana peel jokes. Stewart spent his early life working in circuses, medicine shows, and vaudeville, where he befriended Mark Twain and later Will Rogers, 2 men who shared similar comic wit. Those banana jokes, huh? They really had appeal, putting the ass in potassium. Hashtag Astassium. Records of comedy songs became popular, with vaudeville and musical stars such as Eddie Cantor and Fanny Brice branching out and releasing their own. Bert Williams, of no relation to Ted Williams or Bert from Sesame Street, was an iconic vaudeville entertainer, and by far the best-selling black recording artist before 1920. He was the Michael Jackson of joke crackin'. Yes, he was. Few stage performers were recording as early as 1910, because their onstage styles didn't translate well to the limited technical media of the day. However, Williams's low-key natural delivery was ideal for discs of this time. Williams's most remembered song, Nobody, remained active in Columbia's sales catalog into the 1930s. Nobody sold between 1 and 150,000 copies, a phenomenally high amount for this era. It was as close to platinum as you could get in an age of aluminum and tinfoil. When radio became popular with higher fidelity FM broadcasting in the early 1930s, sales of records dropped dramatically. Although Spike Jones, of no relation to Spike Lee or Spike TV, had some success in the late 1940s. Jones was a musician and bandleader, specializing in spoof arrangements of popular songs and classical music alike. Ballads receiving the Jones treatment were punctuated with gunshots, whistles, cowbells, and outlandish comedic vocals. Comedy albums were held back by the technology of their time, only allowing for short recordings. When longer duration LP records were introduced in 1948, it allowed artists such as Stan Freberg, Tom Lehrer, Mort Sahl, and Shelley Berman to record material that more closely resembled modern comedy albums. A recording of primarily pop culture satire from Stan Freberg's radio comedy show won the first ever Grammy Award for Best Spoken Word Album in 1959. Fun fact, Dave Chappelle has won that award every year since. Freberg was one of the talents recruited by Capitol Records when it launched its very own spoken word division in 1951. Freberg was known for his political and cultural satire. In 1966, he recorded an album, Freberg Underground, in a format similar to his radio show, calling it Pay Radio, a parody of the term pay TV for subscription-based television, because you have to go to the record store to buy it. The one album to possibly be considered the first modern comedy album is Mort Sahl's 1958 classic, The Future Lies Ahead, which was a recording of his comedy routine in front of a live audience. As a comedian, actor, and social satirist, Sahl pioneered a style of social satire, which pokes fun at political and current events, using improvised monologues and a newspaper as a prop. The 1959 album of sketch comedy tracks Inside Shelley Berman is regarded as the first actual comedy hit, and was the first to win a Grammy Award for Best Comedy Album in 1960. Berman's comedy albums earned 3 gold records. He is credited with being the first to perform the telephone call routine, although it was originally done by 1920s vaudevillian George Jessel, which was later used by comedians who followed. These inspired generations of prank calls and refrigerators who never quite learned to run away from people. Berman appeared on numerous television specials and on all of the major variety shows of the day. He continued with a very successful comedy career, including his Emmy Award-nominated 2002 to 2009 role as Larry David's father on the television series Curb Your Enthusiasm. The 1960s saw a comedy album explosion with the likes of Bob Newhart, Nichols May, Jonathan Winters, Carl Reiner, Mel Brooks, and Bill Cosby. Bob Newhart, known for his deadpan comedic style, created an intentional stammer in service to his unique combination of politeness and disbelief at whatever he was supposedly hearing. He used that delivery technique throughout his career. Newhart's 1960 comedy album, The Button-Down Mind of Bob Newhart, was the first comedy album to make #1 on the Billboard charts. It won the 1961 Grammy for Album of the Year and peaked at #2 on the UK album chart. That year, Newhart also won Best New Artist. The follow-up album, The Button-Down Mind Strikes Back, boom! Take that, Star Wars, was released 6 months later and won Best Comedy Album Performance later that year. The two albums occupied the two top spots for nearly 30 weeks. Newhart's career later included 2 critically acclaimed sitcoms, The Bob Newhart Show and, simply titled, Newhart. Yes, they saved all their creativity for the episodes and not the titles of the sitcom. Newhart said in a 2005 interview for PBS's American Masters series that his favorite stand-up routine is Abe Lincoln versus Madison Avenue. In the routine, a slick promoter has to deal with Lincoln's reluctance to agree to his efforts to boost his image. Nichols May was an American improvisational comedy duo act developed by Mike Nichols and Elaine May. They originated out of the Second City Improv Group, where they were colleagues of Shelley Berman. They had 3 comedy albums reach the Billboard Top 40 between 1958 and 1962. Many comedians have cited them as being major influences in modern comedy. You can't get any better than they were, TV host Dick Cavett remembered. They were one of those comic meteors in the sky, Woody Allen declared. The two of them, they came along and they elevated comedy to a brand new level. I appreciate Nichols and May, because without them, I would not be able to do my Woody Allen voice on this recording. Their 1960 album, An Evening with Mike Nichols and Elaine May, won a Grammy for Best Comedy Performance. Nichols and May grew in fame quickly. In 1962, for John F. Kennedy's birthday, they performed alongside Marilyn Monroe. Elaine May became a writer and sometimes actress for several theater, movie, and television productions, including Heaven Can Wait, Labyrinth, and Tootsie. Mike Nichols went on to a prolific theater and film career, directing works such as Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, The Graduate, The Birdcage, and Spamalot.
Mike Nichols and Elaine May.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to Long Dust. Can I help you?
Yes, I read your ad. I'm interested in the $65 funeral.
Was that for yourself?
No.
For another? May I ask, where did you catch that ad?
TV Guide.
Just trying to find out where our trade comes from. I am afraid that I'm going to have to ask you some questions.
Yes, that's all right.
All right. Can you tell me, what was the loved one's name?
Seymour Maslow Free.
Is that hyphenated?
It was.
And the loved one's address?
441118 Southeast Huguenot Walloon Drive.
And may I ask what your name is?
Charlie.
Charlie. Charlie, I'm Miss Loomis, your grief lady.
Hi.
Is it Charlie Maslow Flynn?
Yeah.
You're related. Well, that will be $65.
Thank you. I have the check all made out.
Oh, wonderful. A minute before you go, Mr. Maslow Flynn, I was just wondering, would you be interested in some extras for the loved one?
What kind of extras?
Well, how about a casket?
Jonathan Winters was an American comedian, actor, author, television host, and artist. His parents separated when Winters was young. "Mother and Dad didn't understand me. I didn't understand them," Winters said in an interview. "So consequently, it was a strange kind of arrangement." Alone in his room, he created characters and developed a repertoire of strange sound effects. Winters was a pioneer of improvisational stand-up comedy with a gift for mimicry, impersonations, various personalities, and an endless creative energy. Jack Parr once said, "If you ask me who are the 25 funniest people I'd ever known, I'd have to say, here they are, Jonathan Winters. Pound for pound, the funniest man alive." Beginning in 1960, Winters recorded many classic comedy albums for the Verve record label. He also had records released every decade for over 50 years, receiving 11 Grammy nominations, including 8 for Best Comedy Album and the Grammy Award for Best Spoken Comedy Album for Cranky Calls in 1996. With a career spanning more than 6 decades, Winters also appeared in hundreds of television shows and films. In 1960, Winters received the Star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
He's Johnny Winters. He cannot be imitated. The wild, wild man, my friend Jonathan Winters. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jack. That thing you said, he'll probably die tonight. But I've had a full life. 38. So, easy come, easy go. I had kind of a different day today. Several things happened I can't tell you about because they only embarrass you and embarrass me and have my family going. But I did a thing that a lot of us probably would like to do. Maybe few of us don't. I don't know. I'll just have to ask you. Did you ever undress in front of a dog?
Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks released several iconic comedy albums, beginning with The 2,000-Year-Old Man. Brooks plays the 2,000-year-old man, interviewed by Reiner, in a series of comedy routines that became a collection of records and were performed on television. Reiner describes how the routines began. "I remember the first question I asked him. Here's a man who's actually seen the crucifixion 2,000 years ago. You know Jesus?" "Yeah," he said. "Thin lad, wore sandals, long hair, walked around with 11 other guys. Always came into the store, never bought anything, always asked for water." Those were the first words. And then, for the next hour or two, I just kept asking him questions, and he never stopped killing us. It began as a joke between the two, and then it was shared at parties. Reiner recalls the moment that he and Brooks realized that the first album was going to be a hit. "When the album came out, we weren't sure whether everybody was going to like it. I gave my neighbor, Cary Grant, a record and said, 'This new record came out. You may like it.' He came back a week later and said, 'Can I have 2 dozen?' I said, 'What are you going to do with them?' He said, 'I'm going to take them to England.' 'You'll take these to England?' He said, 'Yeah, they speak English there.' He came back and said she loved it. And I said, 'Who?' And he said, 'The Queen Mother.' I said, 'You played this in Buckingham Palace?' He said, 'Yes.' And then Mel says, 'Well, if the biggest shitska in the world loves it, we're home free.' The only thing that's more impressive than the power and longevity of the 2,000-year-old man routine is that both Brooks and Reiner have actually lived to be over 2,000 years old each. Talk about life imitating art. Bill Cosby, an American stand-up comedian, actor, author, and prisoner, held an active career for over 6 decades. He began his stand-up career in 1961. In 1963, he received national exposure on NBC's The Tonight Show, which led to a recording contract with Warner Bros. Records. His recording portfolio began with his 1964 debut, Bill Cosby is a Very Funny Fellow, right? His album, To Russell, My Brother, Whom I Slept With, was #1 on Spin Magazine's list of the 40 greatest comedy albums of all time. They called it stand-up comedy's masterpiece. While many comics of the time were using the growing freedom to explore controversial and sometimes risque material, Cosby was making his reputation with humorous recollections of his childhood. Many Americans wondered about the absence of race as a topic in Cosby's stories. As Cosby's success grew, he had to defend his choice of material regularly. As he argued, "A white person listens to my act and he laughs. And he thinks, that's the way I see it too. Okay, he's white, I'm Negro, and we both see things the same way. That must mean we're alike, right? So I figure in this way, I'm doing as much for the race relations as the next guy." Unfortunately, in 2018, Cosby was convicted of a number of sex offenses, some of them dating back to 1965. He is now serving his sentence in Pennsylvania.
Noah. Who is that? It's the Lord, Noah. Right. Where are you? What do you want? I've been good. I want you to build an ark. Right. What's an ark? Go out into the woods, collect all of the animals in the world by two, and make the ark out of cubits, 80 cubits, 40 cubits, 30 cubits. Right. What's a cubit? Let's see, a cubit. I used to know what. Well, don't worry about that. Just go out and collect all those animals by twos, male and female, and put them into the ark. Right. Who is this really? What's going on? How come you want me to do all these weird things? I'm going to destroy the world. Right. Am I on candid camera? How you gonna do it? Wanna make it rain for 1,000 days and drown them out? Right. Listen, do this, you'll save water. Let it rain for 40 days and 40 nights and wait for the sewers to back up. Right.
Party records were a genre of blue comedy albums from the 1950s, 60s, and 70s that were notable for their raunchy adult content and often featured African American comedians. Due to obscenity laws, party records were typically not displayed at the record store shelves, but kept under the counter, sold by request, and promoted by word of mouth. According to the website ComedyHistory101.com, party records were albums that people would play at night after the kids went to bed. Records you weren't supposed to have. They weren't on the shelves at the record stores. You'd have to ask for them. Then they would reach under the counter and pull them out of a paper bag. It was almost like you were doing a drug deal. That's right, those records were often sold in brown paper bags, just like pornography, but typically less sticky and with fewer stains on the sleeves. Comedians who became known due to party records include LaWanda Page of Sanford & Son fame, Rudy Ray Moore, creator of Dolomite, Tina Dixon, Belle Barth, Skillet and Leroy, Richard and Willie, Moms Mabley, and Red Fox. Jackie Moms Mabley came out as a lesbian at age 27, becoming one of the first openly gay comedians. During the 1920s and 30s, she appeared in androgynous clothing and recorded several lesbian-based stand-up routines. She produced 20 comedy albums in the 60s and 70s. During the 1950s, Mabley adopted the name Moms and the appearance of a toothless, bedraggled woman in a house dress and floppy hat. The non-threatening persona aided her in addressing topics too edgy for most comics at the time, including racism and sexuality. In the 1960s, Mabley became known to a wider white audience by playing Carnegie Hall in 1962 and making a number of mainstream TV appearances. Music became a regular part of her act. When she covered the song Abraham, Martin, and John, it hit number 35 on Billboard's Hot 100 in 1969, making Mabley, at 75, the oldest living person to have a US Top 40 hit.
Listen, Ben, if you're my friend, don't sit on my bed. In other words, don't crouch on the couch, son. I don't like it.
John Elroy Sanford, better known by his stage name as Red Fox, of no relation to Jamie Foxx, Fox News, or BET's new program, Jamie Foxx News, was an American stand-up comedian and actor. Fox gained success with his raunchy nightclub acts during the 1950s and 60s. He was signed to a long-term record contract and released a series of comedy albums that quickly became cult favorites. Known as the King of the Party Records, he performed on more than 50 records in his lifetime. Fox later portrayed Fred G. Sanford on the television show Sanford & Son. He was one of the first black comics to play to white audiences on the Las Vegas Strip. In 1992, Fox was given a star on the St. Louis Walk of Fame, which as we all know is like the Hollywood Walk of Fame, but with more barbecue trucks. In 2004, Fox ranked 24th in Comedy Central Presents 100 Greatest Stand-Ups of All Time list. Fox not only influenced many comedians, but was often portrayed in popular culture as well, mainly as a result of his catchphrases, body language, and facial expressions.
And they stopped to talk. He said, Rev, what happened to your bicycle? And Rev said, well, somebody in my congregation stole my bicycle. I don't know what to do with it. Rev said, well, look, if you want your bicycle and go to church this Sunday, all you do is say the 10 Commandments. When you get the commandment, it says, thou shalt not steal. Ever who stole your bicycle will feel guilty and bring it back to you. And sure enough, the next Sunday, both the preachers were riding their bicycles, and they stopped to talk and said, Rev, I see you got your bike back. Did you do like I told you? The other Rev said, yeah, I did just like you told me. When I got the commandment where it says, thou shalt not commit adultery, I remember where I left my bicycle. This was a Southern preacher, and he was addressing some of his congregation. He said, listen, brothers and sisters, we need a whole lot of money to build a new church and work hard and get more money. He said, matter of fact, we got to work like beavers. And one of the sisters said, but Rev, you know, beavers work with their tail. The Reverend said, well, all right then. It was Reverend down south. He was getting on the way with his sermon. He walked up, looked over the congregation. He said, you know, brothers and sisters, here in my congregation, there's a lot of brothers in the house this morning. Been messing around with the sisters. He said, and if every brother who's been messing around with the sisters don't put $5 in the collection, I'm going to call his name out. Took up the collection. And after a little singing and everything, they started counting. They found out the money was 75 $5 bills and 2 singles with a little note pinned on it saying, we'll bring the other 3 next Sunday.
Oh, and we're not done yet. In our next episode, we'll look at the comics and comedy albums of the 1970s, particularly those with a reputation for counterculturalism and NSF-TV, not safe for television content. Thank you for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button to get more. It's all comedy in theory. I'm Charlie Spink, and you're very welcome.
It's all jokes, it's all good. It's all jokes, it's all good. Comedy, baby. Ha ha!